Hi everyone, so today we're going to be looking at plant systems and particularly the vascular tissue system. So the study design dot point says that you're looking at the organization of plant cells into tissues, so the vascular tissue is what we're looking at for specific functions in vascular plants, including intake, movement, and loss of water, which we're going to look at, as well as the regulation of water balance in vascular plants. So let's get started. So this is just a recap. So we've looked at how animal cells can become tissues, organ systems, and complex organisms. This is the same for plants. We can have plant cells, leaf tissues, leaves, a leaf stem or root system, and then a whole organism. This is a really cool video that I suggest you watch. We will watch it in class, but you can go to this link and I'll have it linked in the description below as well, which I think is very interesting and provides a lot of context to what we're learning about. So we're going to look a little bit at transport systems in plants. So we know that plants need water, carbon dioxide, and light for photosynthesis. And photosynthesis is how they produce their own food and energy in the form of glucose. So we're going to be focusing on vascular plants. So vascular plants are a lot of ferns, conifers, flowering plants, plants that you would see out in our environment usually. They absorb water through the roots and carbon dioxide through the leaves. So this is the most common type of plant, the plant that you're most familiar with probably. Non-vascular plants tend to be liverworts, mosses, and hornworts. If you've never heard of them, that's okay. They absorb water directly from the environment into the body tissue via diffusion. So we're not looking at vascular plants. So we're not looking at non-vascular plants. We're looking at vascular plants. You don't need to remember the different types. I just want you to know that we're focusing on specifically vascular plants that absorb water through their roots. So we're actually going to start on the tissue level, which I find is a little bit easier to understand because we're focusing mostly on vascular tissue. There are a few different types of cells that make up vascular tissue, but I want you to understand what vascular tissue is first. So these are tubular pathways called xylem and phloem. You can see them here in some celery. And they're continuous through the roots, stems, leaves, and fruit. So they move all the way through the plant, and they carry water and nutrients that are obtained from the soil by the roots throughout the plant. So you can understand why they're very important, because a plant is not going to survive without water or nutrients. They have an important job. Well, phloem particularly has an important job in transporting glucose that is made in the leaves to other parts of the plant. So glucose is the output of photosynthesis. It is what plants need for cellular respiration. And so the phloem tissue is what transports this. Super important job. So let's have a little bit of a closer look. So xylem specifically transports water and inorganic nutrients up the plant from the soil, so it is one direction, so it moves up only. Phloem transports glucose produced by photosynthesis throughout the plant, and it can go in either direction, so it goes two ways. And you can see here, this is the xylem tissue and this is the phloem tissue. They're slightly different, and we're going to look at that in a little bit more detail. So in plants, the vascular tissue arrangement is actually pretty cool. We've at the root, if we cut a root open of a plant and looked at it under a microscope, we would see something that looks like this, so a very X or cross-shaped arrangement of tissues. And so the red part in the middle here, this is the xylem, so this is what's transporting water up the plant. And this blue part over here, which is indicated by the green in this diagram, is the phloem, and this is what's transporting glucose around the plant. Let's have a little bit of a deeper look at xylem. So xylem, as we know, are tubes that transport water and minerals from the roots to the rest of the plant in one direction. Xylem is made up of hardened, rigid cells that stack end to end to create a hollow tube, so that you can see them stacking together. These cells are dead. Right? They're very hard. They're just providing the structure for this tissue. So how does water move up the xylem from the roots to the leaves? So if we look at this tree over here, this is Hyperion. It is the world's tallest living tree. It is my favorite tree. Its location is actually kept secret because the scientists that look after this tree don't want people visiting this tree and possibly destroying it. So this very secret location of the tallest tree in the world, and it is 116 meters tall, which is absolutely huge. It is about 600 to 800 years old. So how does Hyperion, for example, transport water from the roots up to the leaves? And this process doesn't require any energy, which I think is pretty cool because this tree, Hyperion, is able to transport water 116 meters up. It does that in 4 different ways. So there's osmosis in the roots, so we've looked at osmosis. There's adhesion between the water and the xylem walls, which we'll look at in a second, as well as cohesion between the water molecules, which we're going to look at as well, and transpiration, which creates a negative pressure. Again, going to have a deeper look into this. So what are these forces that move or transport water from the roots to the leaves? Well, adhesion, right, is the force of attraction between water and other surfaces. So we've got the water molecule being attracted or adhering to the xylem walls. And as the water is attracted to the xylem walls, it kind of pulls it up. And then we also have cohesion. So that's the attraction between water molecules. And as water molecules move up the xylem, the water molecules underneath it get pulled up because they're all attracted to each other and they move together up the xylem. Now we have transpiration. So this is the loss of water vapor through leaves via evaporation. So this is liquid water becoming water vapor and evaporating into the environment. The water evaporates through pores in the leaf, as you can see on the right hand side over here. And these pores are called stomata, and they can open and close. And stomata are pretty important because they also allow for the exchange of gases. So carbon dioxide can go in and oxygen can come out, as well as water. As this happens, the leaf draws water from the nearby xylem vessels to replace the lost water. So remember, think about the cohesion, the attraction of water molecules to other water molecules. As water evaporates through the stomata out of the plant, other water molecules below it are being pulled up, and that is one way the water moves up the xylem without any energy. There are thousands of leaf cells, each drawing water up from the xylem, and this creates a suction that pulls water up the xylem vessels from the roots. So you can kind of think of it in the same way as drinking something with a straw. As you are pulling the liquid up as you're drinking it, it is pulling the rest of the liquid from the drink, from the cup or whatever, up the straw as well. And so all that liquid is attracted to each other, and that suction moves all that liquid up the straw. This is what's happening with transpiration and xylem. So the pull of transpiration is actually so strong, combined with cohesion, to draw water more than 100 meters up a tree trunk, like we saw with Hyperion. And so this is just a comparison of how tall Hyperion really is. Over here on this far left side, that's a human. That's the size of an average human, so that was 1.8 meters, and a Hyperion is over here at 116 meters, so it's massive, and this is what transpiration is able to do. And transpiration doesn't actually require a fully intact root system. It can even continue when we have cut flowers in a vase, or leafy shoots in a vase, or even if the stem is killed with poison or heat, because that cohesion and the adhesion and transpiration all depend on just water being suctioned up through the process of evaporation, and the attraction to each other and the walls of the xylem. So why do plants need to regulate transpiration or regulate water loss? So we know that over here, this is an image of stomata, and we remember that stomata are the pores in a leaf and that allow exchange of gases, so CO2 in, O2 out, as well as H2O. So about 95% of water is released through the stomata here. And as we know, plants need water to survive, so they have to regulate water loss. They can't just lose all their water or they won't survive. Plants need to maintain a certain amount of water to survive, and so this process is really important. And one way plants regulate water loss is by opening and closing the stomata, and this helps conserve or maintain a level of water in response to the environment. So it might close the stomata when it's really hot, or when there's a high availability of water, it might open the stomata because it doesn't need to conserve as much water, so it's able to release more water vapor. Ultimately, losing too much water means that the plant will die. So now that we know that regulating transpiration is important for the survival of plants, let's look at factors that affect the rate of transpiration, because if the rate of transpiration is too high, we will have too much water loss and the plant will die. So we have high temperatures. So if temperatures are very hot, this means there is a higher rate of transpiration, obviously because this increases evaporation, therefore higher loss of water. If there's high winds, this can also increase the rate of transpiration and water loss. If there is high surface area to volume ratio, for example, on the leaves, this also increases rate of transpiration because there are more exit points for water to leave. If there's high availability of water, again, higher rate of transpiration, more water loss, but this is because the plant doesn't need to conserve as much water if there is always water available. If there's low humidity, right, so very dry, again, higher rates of transpiration and water loss. Because water is lost through the stomata, plants will open and close their stomata to regulate transpiration and water loss, and this is one adaptation plants have to help them survive. And this is just a summary picture of the factors that affect the rate of transpiration, and we're actually going to do a prac on this, so you'll get to investigate this on your own. So let's look at some other factors that might affect the rate of transpiration. Well, we know that transpiration rate is low at night because it's cooler, it's more humid, and stomata tend to actually be closed at night. Hairs, as you can see in this photo on the right, on the plant can actually create a layer of undisturbed air that's very humid, very hot, and well, not very hot, very warm, and has a lot of water vapor around the leaf, so around the stomata, and this also reduces the rate of transpiration. Now that we've looked at transpiration and xylem, we're going to look at the other type of vascular tissue that I want you to know about, and that's phloem. And so phloem transport sugars, sucrose or glucose, produced by photosynthesis throughout the plant, and this process is called translocation. The phloem, as you can see on the right-hand side, is composed of sieve tube cells, as well as companion cells down the side. So the sieve tube cells have no nucleus, but the companion cells do. These are living cells, unlike the dead cells in xylem. So xylem is made up of stacked, dead, very hard and rigid cells. The phloem has the sieve tube cells and companion cells. So let's look at the process of translocation. So glucose or sucrose, in some cases, is made by the cells in the leaves, which we call the source. So the source cell is the leaf. That's where the glucose is coming from. It's made through the process of photosynthesis. The glucose moves from the leaves moves into the sieve cells by facilitated diffusion. So it's moving this way by facilitated diffusion. So it's using protein channels and carrier proteins. Water moves by osmosis from the xylem into the phloem, and that creates a concentration gradient. This pressure pushes the glucose down the phloem, and the glucose is then able to move into the sink cells. So this is where either the cells that are using the glucose or the cells that are storing the glucose as starch. So the source cells make the glucose. It moves through the phloem via facilitated diffusion and the pressure that transpiration creates in the xylem, and this pushes it down to the sink cells where it is used or it is stored as starch. Translocation doesn't just move glucose, it can also move other substances such as amino acids, and in this case these amino acids come from inorganic nitrogenous ions in soil. And this is just a summary image of the xylem and the phloem. And both the xylem and the phloem work together. So we've got the movement of water up the xylem through transpiration, adhesion, and cohesion. This creates pressure that pushes the glucose or sucrose or amino acids through the phloem around the plant so that all parts of the plants are getting nutrients. And this is a cycle that continues, which I think is pretty cool. So to finish off, I'm just going to play a part of a video here. So this is in the PowerPoint, so you can watch the whole video if you want. It is just going to show you the movement of water and sugar or glucose in the plant. So this is in the roots. You can see that the water is moving into the plant through those root hairs. And the glucose is moving down into the root while the water is moving up. And so you can identify which part is the xylem and which part is the phloem. And so this is an even deeper look. So we've got the xylem on the left over here and the phloem in the middle over here. And you see the water move through the plant cells into the xylem tissue and up. And now you are seeing the glucose, these red dots that are made in the leaves of the plant, move down the phloem to all parts of the plant. So I'm going to stop there. If you have any questions, please write them down and bring them to class, and I will see you then.